Dear Megan Marks and all you women who are contending for the gospel, my goodness, I like to repeat this one thing. I took a 24-year tour of the church mess in America. I sat with all these different atmospheres for long periods of time to see what they were doing right, to see what they are doing right, and also to observe the disasters that are happening in their home environments. I mean, it's one thing for somebody to be preaching the gospel, but it's another thing for them to have children who are wildly out of control and basically not even enjoying the things that the parents are putting together. Motivating and inspiring people to eat from the tree of life is a thing that actually takes a lot of self awareness and awareness of what Jesus taught the apostles. So here's the deal. Megan Marks, I saw you connect with TLR, and I want to tell you there are three unclean spirits that my precious friend Torben Sondergaard are stuck under, and he is not doing like what Paul says. Paul says, hey, after my salvation, there's still unclean spirits that God allows to stick around, and my biggest job is to be cheerful and let my friends know I'm still stupid in this area. The Holy Spirit controls me, but there is a spirit in my atmosphere when I'm weak. I perform poorly in this certain area. So he's telling his friends, hey, you guys, I'm still dumb in this area. I haven't turned into Jesus yet. I have a perfect friend. Let me tell you about how I'm imperfect. That is one of the greatest ways of being in leadership, is describing your weaknesses. If you're running a business, you want to focus on the downsides first and make sure you take care of the areas where you're really weak. So my precious friend Torben Sondergaard has three primary demonic strongholds. Number one, he tends to settle into a rut and have a really nice time with what he enjoys. He confesses that when he was a youngster, he used to love to party on the couch, drinking soda and eating chips and watching favorite movies. Okay, so he's discovered this wonderful atmosphere of the gospel, going out and doing miracles and getting people baptized in the Holy Spirit, and he's all comfy in that, and he just loves to do that thing. But there are other elements of the gospel that he has chosen to ignore. He is choosing to ignore some elements of the scriptures. So number one, he tends to get into a party rut. He tends to get into a happy time, favorite kind of entertainment rut. Number two, he tends to be combative. He's kind of like a little bit like a fist fighter. If you challenge him, he'll fight you. Now, the problem is he now knows how to fight by condemning people spiritually and saying they don't have their act together. It is one of the worst kinds of fighting. And that's what you call the seven demons worse. If a person who tended to be a tough guy and get into a fight, that person is not going to fight physically. But if a person challenges them, he's going to rise up and hit their comments with an attack, with a debate attack or a spiritual pride attack. So number one, love of party and getting into a rut. Number two, getting into a combative or a fighting atmosphere. And then number three, he has a serious discomfort with eldership. He has a stronghold of not being comfortable with elders who can actually guide and tell experiences and give revelation. Those are three areas. And what happens is those three unclean spirits have contributed to him getting stuck in a certain part of the gospel, fighting away people that might correct him, and also not seeking elders that can tell the stories that help him understand why the scriptures are true and powerful. When we come together, Megan, when we come together, the men lead the admission of fault and the describing of what spiritual strongholds remain. One of the coolest things to study is an evil spirit from the Lord. It's like, oh, we get saved, and God's power, and Jesus is teaching, and blah, 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 blah. But you know what? One of the greatest things is like, how do you remain weak? What areas are you still stuck in even though you've received salvation? That is the silver and the gold and the precious stones. Read 1 Corinthians 3, verse 10 to 15. You're saved, but now you are building your mansion in heaven. You're building a spiritual house. And you're either going to use cheap materials and just basically do the same thing over and over again, or you're going to deny yourself and you're going to do the things that expose yourself and cause you to be humble, humbling yourself. I mean, one of the most difficult things for women is that in Isaiah 4, it says, on Judgment Day, the woman will be judged for how she has aligned herself with male human beings because she came out of the flesh. She didn't come from the dirt. And the reality is the judgment of the woman is how she is aligned with men of God, the teaching of God, and a true, actual, close family. A communion group family is the ecclesia. There is no longer a temple. There is no longer a tabernacle. Jesus shifted. He shifted the Holy of Holies. He shifted the place of atonement to a family gathering with family men who are all admitting their faults and in a peaceable, good cheer atmosphere where the women are delighted because, oh my gosh, these guys like get on each other's cases and they say, okay, how have you treated your family this week? How did you screw up? Please confess right here in this group to your wife and your children the ways that you could have done better. And when the women hear the men giving one another a challenge in a tough time, they're like, wow, I don't even have to nag my man. Like, these guys are like really looking out for the way that they handle their women and their children, and this is really awesome. That is the new ecclesia. That is the new temple and tabernacle. Read Acts 14, verse 21 to 23. That is one place in the Bible where you see what an apostle does. Precious Torben is an evangelist. He's getting out there and he's touching people's souls, but he is not an apostle. I don't see him teaching about the apostles' teaching, the teachings. Read 2 John, verse 8 to 11. Read it and read it out loud and read it over and over again. There are many Christians who don't have God because they're going forth without the full detailed teachings of how to be the people of God. The full detailed teachings is we come together, we have an agape feast, and we invite friends and neighbors, and we all enjoy one another's company and food, and we declare we are all children of God. But then the ones who are not willing to die for Jesus right now today are dismissed from our house. We lock the doors, and then we admit our faults and we cleanse our souls and we take communion, and we get so deeply connected with Jesus that we're sitting on the mercy seat, and we can talk to the Holy Spirit and we can ask him our family needs, our business needs, our outreach guidance. We can talk to the Holy Spirit about exactly what he wants us to do. And we can actually store up questions. You know, brothers, can we ask this one question about Sister so-and-so who wants to move to North Carolina? Can we just ask the Lord? And you ask the Lord together. And what you get is what the Quakers call a gathered meeting, where everybody gets the same answer. Just like in Acts 13, send out Paul and Barnabas, or Acts 15, okay, it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to all of us to not put any burden on the Gentiles other than the covenant of Noah. So, Megan and all you precious sisters, I feel like I'm surrounded by so many sisters who are contending for the gospel, who are truly contending for the gospel, but no one has given them the example of men who are actually being real, just like in Leviticus 15, about their flow, about their arousal, about anything that's troubling their minds, any obsessions. And the men are so open-hearted, transparent, and clear before the entire family together. The women feel so comforted because the men are challenging one another. The men set the spirit tone for the family. The men set the spirit tone for the family. And you can preach all day long and you can open people's hearts to God. But if you are not teaching them how to be the new temple, the ecclesia, and how to keep the whole family pure and raise the children, hearing elders who are talking about the ordinary sins that come to your heart and come to your life, the children are not going to be raised in the way of refreshment. I wasn't raised in the way of refreshment. Just because I discovered the feel good and I discovered pictures of beautiful naked people, I was stuck in arousal addiction spirits for the better part of 40 years. And it's a very common thing. I mean, Genesis 2:25 says they were naked and not ashamed. So that there's a longing in every human soul to just go back to the nakedness and the closeness that we were originally designed with. So don't be surprised if people get stuck in the looking at and the obsession with the beauty of the of the aroused people together. Don't be surprised, and prepare. If you don't prepare your young ones to deal with the stresses of life, you're really not doing the whole gospel job. You need to create the atmosphere of the family being honest about all the goofy things that we get stuck in and being cheerful about the fact that our humility is what unifies us together and it exalts us in God's presence. So, all you folks, Megan and Rahama and, oh my gosh, Diane and Deborah and Leah and all you folks, may you build the ecclesia circle of men around you and your life. Sabella too. Sabella comes from the same lineage of the International Churches of Christ. She's got a freshness and a kindness and a strength, and I bless you all. But I honestly am at a point where I need to break relationship with many people, except for those who are in agreement on this one really important atmosphere that I never had, which is true ecclesia in the home with honesty times led by the men. If that's not in place, I don't care how many people you're evangelizing, because you're not bringing them into the safety and maintenance atmosphere that Jesus taught his apostles to create. Acts 14:21 to 23. 2 John 8 to 11. If you rush ahead and do all kinds of salvations and miracles, but you do not bring the full teaching of Christ, including the full teaching of the new Holy of Holies, which is a communion group in the home, if you do not bring the full teachings of Christ, including with the head covering, I mean, in our house, we have a security blanket. We have the nice little prayer shawls, and they go on everybody's shoulders when we're going into God's presence. Yes, you're praying all the time. I do not agree with all the time head covering, because if the early disciples, if you couldn't pick them out in the crowd, if they were able to kind of settle into all different types of people, it's when you go home and you get into God's presence and you're asking him for guidance on your personal lives. For example, I'm hanging out with a precious friend from Wisconsin, and I'm getting all of these uploads from the love of Christ of little things to do in his home where there are not very many believers, but there's no communion group circle to speak to. And I don't know, it's rough. It's rough getting the revelation of God, but standing with people who are actually disobedient and not forming the new Holy of Holies, the new ecclesia. So, it's a stiff fight, but I'm telling you, there's a wave of transformation happening, and I am a voice calling in the desert. And just like Elijah in the cave was like, oh no, I'm all alone. And God says, no, there's 7,000 others that understand what you understand, but you just haven't ever met them. So I'm trying to keep myself encouraged. I'm trying to encourage my own heart. But I do want to tell you, I have to take many steps back from people who are not hungry for this creating of the communion group circle. It's almost like giving a child the keys to the car, but never training them on how to drive and never training them on changing the oil. All they know how to do is put gas in the car and run it. And it will die soon if they just run it and run it and run it and have nothing to do with maintenance and changing the oil. The coming together, admitting faults, doing communion, and talking with God as a whole family unit, not as one family, but a cluster of families, so that brothers can say, hey, you guys have 5 cars and you only have 3 people. You should probably give away one of your cars. Like there's an excess going on. We can observe one another's weaknesses and strongholds and guide one another. If that kind of stuff is not happening in place in your cluster of families, then you can do all the evangelism you want to do, but you're not teaching people how to be in an honesty circle and to be the new Holy of Holies. Please meditate on these things and contact me if you feel like you want to support this mindset, which is the simple, full teachings of Christ.